first off, a big thanks to Autry for allowing us for hosting us here. Obviously, all of you would not have fit where we were originally going to put you, because we probably had maybe, what, 20 spots, 25, 30? Yeah. Love the turnout. This is actually the biggest class I've ever taught. It's kind of intimidating, but we'll get through it. I'm Sergeant Matt Hainley with the Enid Police Department. This is just going to be a brief informational about fentanyl. My job, one of my jobs as a DRE, which I'll explain a little bit in a second, is to help educate and also identify the effects of drugs on the human body and in relation to driving habits and what we're going to look for. So it's a pleasure for me to be able to teach both civilian and law enforcement about the effects of fentanyl and also other drugs. Luckily, I'm only talking about one. If I was talking about all of them, we would be here for 2 weeks, okay? But we're only going to talk about one today. All right, so just like I said, this is going to be a brief little informational speech. We're going to talk about the history of fentanyl. We're going to talk about its forms. We'll talk about the methods of ingestion, things that you're going to be able to see, right? We're also going to talk about the physiology. What does it do to your brain and your body, all right? And then we're also going to be looking into what the overdose signs and symptoms are, which is, I believe, is going to be the reason why a lot of you are here, is to recognize if somebody is possibly overdosing on something such as fentanyl or another narcotic analgesic like fentanyl, okay? I'm with the Enid Police Department. I've been with the Enid Police Department for 9 years now. I was nationally certified as a drug recognition expert in 2017. And recently in 2022, I got my instructor certification, so now I teach incoming DREs. Now, a drug recognition expert, what my job is to come out and evaluate people that have been arrested for driving under the influence of drugs, where the officer who arrested them, they believe, they had probable cause to believe that a subject is impaired, but they don't think it's alcohol related. Or it might be somewhat alcohol related, but does anybody here off the top of their heads know what the per se limit in Oklahoma is for alcohol? 0.08, right? Anybody ever heard that? So if you have somebody that's all over the road, like this person is just drunk, and they get them to the intoxilizer and they blow zeros. Uh-oh. That might not mean that they're not impaired. So they'll call me. I come in, I do my evaluation, and it's my job as a DRE to determine if that subject's impaired, if it's a medical condition causing that subject to be impaired, and if they are impaired by a drug, I'm going to be able to tell you exactly what category of drug or drugs you're on. And so far, in the 6 years I've been doing it, I'm batting 1,000. I've never made a call and missed it. And my highest one, not to toot my own horn, but I'm here, so, was I called it 5 out of the 7 categories. And once we get that blood toxicology back, it tells us exactly what's in their blood, and I got them all right. Your body is going to show me exactly what I'm looking for, and I'm going to be able to nitpick through everything and determine what that person may be on. I say you, I don't mean you guys as far as evaluating you when you're driving drunk, because none of you guys will be doing that. All right. So what is fentanyl? That's the big question. Everybody is hearing it. Now, fentanyl has been around for a long time. It's really only been in the limelight since, what, 2016, 15? Only in the last couple of years. It's been out since the 50s, okay? Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, meaning that it is 100% man-made. With fentanyl, there are 2 other synthetic opioids, common opioids, in that category. Everything else is derived from opium, right? So you're gonna get things like heroin, hydromorphone, buprenorphine, things like that. Those are all derivatives of they're a natural derivative of opium. But fentanyl is 100% man-made in the lab. Nothing natural about it. It was created in 1955 by Paul Jansen, And it was used as an intravenous surgical analgesic. Analgesic meaning painkiller. It's pre-surgery. Has anybody here actually been given fentanyl pre-surgery? I can't be, 1, 2, nobody else? A lot of times what they're going to prescribe or what they're going to use fentanyl for pre-surgical, or if they want you to remain conscious. Has anybody had anything done with their back? Any back problems in here? Okay, I'm one of them. I had to have over a dozen rounds of facet injections. Now, in order to do that, they had to stick 12 needles on each side of my spine into my spine at one time. Without painkillers, that would hurt, okay? But they gave me about 100 to 200 micrograms of fentanyl because it would alleviate the pain and I would stay awake. I would start nodding off, but all they had to do was that. And it would, I'm back up, and they would tell me, can you feel that? Can you feel that? That's originally what it's for. Now, in the 90s, they created the transdermal patch. Transdermal meaning that it absorbs through your skin, okay? And these things were time released. You have some transdermal patches that are supposed to last 3 whole days. For one patch, just slap it on, 3 days later, pull it off, put a new one on, right? Then after that came the lozenges, lollipops, tablets, nasal sprays even. So with those delivery systems were a lot more user-friendly, and therefore it became abusive, right? People would get their hands on them, and then they liked that feeling, that warm feeling going through their body, and pain-free. So they started abusing it. This sparked the creation of the fentanyl analog black market. So now, let's get a couple of guesses. Let's get one from each section. Last year, how many people, just one person, how many people do you think fentanyl, an opioid such as fentanyl, caused their death? Over 100,000, okay? Anybody here? Want to take a guess? We got 100,000 over here. Anybody think lower or higher on this, in the center? Higher? Okay, lower or higher? Lower, okay? So let's start in 2015 when fentanyl actually started getting onto the news. There was 8,600 about, and these are approximations. These are from, I believe, the NIH website that I'm getting these numbers from, and they're still estimations. These are ones where the deaths involved an opioid, not specifically overdose deaths, okay? I'll just make that clear now. So in 2015, 8,609. 4 years later, we're already up to 33,725. It's not a very good trend when you're talking about drug usage. That shows you how much the ability for street drugs to be abused. And once it makes its way into our country, and they get our users to use it, now they have a cheaper drug that they're gonna have more and more of, okay? Because fentanyl costs less than black tar heroin. That used to be the bottom rung. Okay? 2020, 1 year later. That's a 4-year gap between 15 and 19. Look at that. 25,000 more in 4 years. Add another year onto that and it's almost doubled. Okay? 53,000 in 2020. 2021, still going up, 67,000. And last year was 79,770. This year's not looking to be any better, you guys. Pharmaceutical fentanyl. Now, when we're talking about drugs, and you can almost talk about any drug, including PCP. Everybody heard of PCP? Everybody seen those videos where somebody on PCP, they're not gonna go out until they bleed out or they get shot in the brain. They're gonna keep fighting. The original use for a drug like PCP, pre-surgery. It was an analgesic in the 60s. But as soon as they realized the negative effects of it, they Schedule I things. Schedule I meaning it doesn't have any medical use. Fentanyl is still a Schedule II because it's still used today. When I was growing up, I heard of fentanyl, but that was when I was talking about my family who were terminally ill with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They would give them those fentanyl lozenges to keep them pain-free and not have to inject them, not have to keep a port in them, right? It has its purposes. All these drugs have their purposes for the time being, but for every pharmaceutical use, you have somebody that's going to exploit that, including doctors. They're going to overprescribe, and it's going to start with an opioid addiction, usually Lortab, right? How many people have had a sports injury in here? Did you get prescribed painkillers? Did you feel a little bit, was it a lot, like a long term, a month or more of them? Yeah. Getting off of those, even taking them normally, getting off of those, did you feel a little bit sick? It's called being dope sick. Even if you take them as prescribed, it's really hard for your body to get off an opiate. For some, it's almost impossible. They're going to be on an opiate for the rest of their life, using Suboxone, methadone, things like that. Pharmaceutical fentanyl is usually administered by transdermal patch, lozenge, or by injection. Okay? There's your transdermal patch. You would get a box of them, and these are prescription only, right? It's not just you can go to Walgreens and pick these up. You would have to get a prescription box, and it's very, very regulated, the pharmaceutical side of it. That's what one of the lozenges look like. They're lollipops. Don't really look like lollipops, but they did the trick. And then the one that you're most commonly going to be seeing in hospital use is going to be the injection. Now, when we're talking about how much the measurements used in these, when we're talking about fentanyl, it is a very, very, very minimal dose. We're talking micrograms, right? Now, when you're talking about things like marijuana, cocaine, crack, things like that, we're talking grams, right? Dealing with fentanyl, talking micrograms, and we'll get into why that's so important. All of these can find their way onto the street market, even the injectable liquid. I have personally seized injectable liquids of things like lidocaine, which you shouldn't be able to get at your pharmacy, okay? So now let's take a look at this transdermal system real quick. What sticks out to you guys? The MCG, right? Also, you have what is that? That's awesome. Okay. It's not a laser. All right. What number is next to the MCG? 75 micrograms, right? But that's 75 micrograms per hour. Now try and put yourself into the shoes of a drug abuser. What number are they going to see if you can see it? Milligrams. Micrograms, milligrams. So to an abuser, that's a lot of fentanyl. That's a good time for them. But it's a transdermal patch. Transdermal patches is one of the slowest methods of ingestion. So what are they going to do? How are they going to do it? Huh?
Multiple patches.
Multiple patches? Close. I like where you're thinking, but let's think a little bit more bizarre. What don't you think that you would do with something that you stick on your arm? I heard scrape it off. They're going to put it in their mouth, and they're going to chew on it. And they're going to get 7 milligrams as opposed to 75 micrograms. Now, illicit fentanyl, primarily manufactured in China and Mexico. And then it's smuggled in the United States, usually through Mexican cartels. Right now, from what I've seen, the CJNG is the main cartel down there that's pumping drugs into the United States. All right? Now, all of this that you're seeing is fentanyl. It comes in many, many forms. It's going to be smuggled in powder, pill, and liquid forms. Right here, you have pure fentanyl powder. Over here, you got the pills. And they aren't just your normal, just regular white pills. They're very structurally organized. And I'll show you a couple examples. We're going to play a little game. And then back here, you have 2 5-gallon jugs of liquid fentanyl. You wouldn't believe the stuff that they get into as far as transporting and getting this stuff into our country. We don't have the resources or the money to even dive into half of it like they do down on the border. And they're scraping for money down on the border to try and get into those trucks, especially the big rigs. They're coming up with new and different ways. We're not mechanics. We have maybe 3 mechanics over at Enid PD that are just mechanics on their own. They're full-time police officers, mechanics as a hobby. It would take them forever to crack open all those little hiding spaces that you'll find in a common mule car. All right, so we're going to take a show of hands. You have 2 very similar pills. Which one is real? How many people think the one on the right is the real pill? Keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4. How many people think the one on the left is the real pill? Okay. On the left, you have 30 milligram oxycodone, or OxyContin is what it's more commonly known as. And on the right, you have fentanyl. We're not even talking about children. Do you think somebody else, just your average person, might be able to not tell the difference between the real one and the fake one? Their pill presses are getting ridiculously good. Okay? Let's try the next one. This is Adderall. It's supposed to be an amphetamine. Which one's real? Which one's fake? How many people think the one on the left is real? Okay? How many people think the one on the right is the real one? All right. The one on the left is the Adderall. The one on the right would be the fentanyl. All right? Now we're getting into more the CNS depressant category, Xanax. Very commonly prescribed. I guarantee you, every one of you in here knows somebody that is prescribed Xanax. Both of those pills look really good. Which one's the fake? How many people think the one on the left? I want 100% participation on this one. How many people think the one on the left is fake? Okay. How many people think the one on the right? They're both counterfeit pills. Now, take a look at what the real pill looks like and tell me this isn't scary. It's uncanny. Now, on average, those pills can contain upwards of 2.5 milligrams of fentanyl. Milligrams, not micrograms. One pill will be enough to put 5, 6 people down. Now, that's just because with those pills, and why those pills are so dangerous is because not every pill is going to be the same, even in the same batch. They're not mixing it up with 100% certainty. So you might have one pill that only has like half a milligram, and you might have another pill that has 2.5 milligrams coming from the same batch. It's a toss-up. Now, with your average opiate addict, they're mostly, if they're addicted by that point, they're going to have a pretty good tolerance. So one pill might not be enough to take them down. Now, what happens to an addict if they're not getting the high they want? They take more. Absolutely. Now, what would happen if they took 2 of those pills at once? Very much so. All right? So how is fentanyl ingested? Well, it can be ingested in a couple ways. They can actually just take the pill, right? It can be insufflated, snorted. One of the most common ways, especially with these pills, is smoking. okay? And that's actually a fentanyl pill being smoked. Now, the way that they classify that, it's called chasing the dragon, right? There's actually two definitions in my area of expertise for chasing the dragon. The first one being is that you never reach the highness of your first time. And those people always go back and they try and make it as good as the first time that they ever tried a drug, and they can never reach it. And before they know it, they become addicted, right? They're chasing that dragon. Now, this is the physical method of it, where what they'll do is they'll take a piece of aluminum foil, obviously, and put their pill on the top of it. Now, they're going to take a lighter underneath, light the lighter, wait for it to start vaporizing, and they're going to have a straw in their mouth right over top of it, and they're just going to move it. And you're going to see little snail trails of black char on that foil. Everything that you've seen here, minus the liquid, I haven't seen any of the liquid stuff, but everything you've seen on here is in town. All of those pills confirmed in town. That method of ingestion, I've seen it dozens of times, very common. So if you have kids at home and you're worried about drug abuse, which is why I think at least half of you are here, is you're worried about your children. Is my kid doing this? Is he going down the wrong path, he or she? Don't overlook foil in their room. If they see a foil ball, unroll it, okay? Because if it's a teenage boy, most likely you just got rotten food that he just didn't throw away, hidden under his bed. But you never know. It's either going to make you gag or it's going to shock you, okay? Don't overlook foil, especially with these pills being out and about. There's a very common way for them to use it. Lastly, it can be injected. Now, the reason why smoking is so fast, or is so popular, is because it's actually the fastest method of ingestion. A lot of people think that injection is going to be the fastest method. It's actually smoking. Because with smoking, it cuts half of the process out. When you inject something into your arm, it's got to go all the way up to your heart, go through the two chambers of the heart, into the lungs where it's oxygenated. While with smoking, it's already being breathed into your lungs where blood is being oxygenated and pumped back out. It cuts that time in half, okay? So that's why people prefer smoking over everything. The only real reason that I've been able to find as to why people prefer the intravenous drug use is that they can feel it coursing through their body. It's just a warm wave. And it's one of those that, yes, I'm in law enforcement. It's my job to get the bad guys off the streets, but it's also my job to make sure that we can try and get them the help that they need and point them in the right direction. So everybody that I've done an evaluation on, I've sat them down and I've talked to them about their addiction. I've talked to them about if they've gotten help. A lot of times it's a yes, and they end up relapsing. So that's how I learned about the intravenous stuff, is that a lot of people just like the way that they could feel it coursing through their body from wherever they stuck it all the way through. That's why they prefer it. Transdermal absorption being the last one, we already used that, or already talked about that a little bit. So now, what is fentanyl going to do to the body? So as I told you before, fentanyl is a synthetic narcotic analgesic. It's a painkiller. All right? Similar to CNS depressants, the narcotic analgesics, they're going to slow down the body's processes. Okay? So your pulse rate's going to be slowed. Your heart rate is going to be slowed. Your blood pressure is going to be slowed. Your body temperature is going to go down. Your muscle tone is going to be very flaccid and gum-like, as opposed to somebody that may be on a stimulant such as meth, where their muscle tone is very rigid. With narcotics, it's going to be like gum. It's going to be very, very flaccid, right? So the people under the influence of fentanyl and other narcotics, or narcotic analgesics, are going to appear as if they're very sedated and relaxed, right? Calm and smooth, almost like they're about to go to sleep, okay? Now, one thing that we learn in the DRE field, and also just in law enforcement in general, because I teach every officer that comes through Enid, I'm the one that teaches them how to do field sobriety tests. I'm the one that teaches them advanced roadside impaired driving. And if they go to DRE school, I'm going to be the one teaching them that they're DRE school. So everything that every officer that has gone through there after me, I promise you, has gotten this training. Okay, and the one thing I tell them about drug abuse is that the eyes don't lie. Okay, you can always see it in the eyes. Now, one thing that's good about fentanyl and the other narcotic analgesics when it comes to the eyes is that they are the only category out of 7 that are going to constrict the pupils. They're going to make them very, very small. They're going to be pinned. That's the best picture I can find, but that doesn't even do it justice. I'm talking about pins, where you can't even tell that they have a pupil. That small, okay? Another thing that narcotic analgesic is going to do is they're going to exhibit ptosis. It's another fancy word for droopy eyelids. And now with narcotics, it's going to be very, very prevalent. They're going to look like they're almost asleep, but they're not. Do you think somebody that can see about as much as her would be safe driving? Nope. She going to try it? Yeah, she'll try. She was actually in a car right there. Okay, some other things you may notice. They'll have depressed reflexes, very slow reaction. They'll be drowsy, they'll very, very drowsy. They'll have dry mouth. The way that you can see if somebody has a dry mouth is look in the corners. If they have white buildup, their mouth is dry. Or if they're swallowing a lot, or they're doing this a lot, their mouth is dry, okay? Facial itching. Basically anywhere where blood vessels are very, very prevalent, where a lot of blood runs through, is where they're going to be itching at. So your face, right near your elbow, right down here for females, there's a lot of veins in the pelvis region because of childbirth. So they're going to be itching around there as well because that's a lot of blood flowing to that area, okay? Inability to concentrate. On the nod. That's the one that you're going to see on the news and on Drugs Inc. and on Intervention, all those shows where you see the people when they're dealing with heroin, fentanyl, painkillers, where they're kind of just sitting down and they look like they're about to go to sleep. But any kind of stimulant is going to get them to wake up, right? So with my guys, I have to tell them, don't think they're asleep. Don't talk crap about them because they're going to hear you and they're going to wake up and they're going to know exactly what you said. So don't do it, all right? If they have that very depressed, almost down, out for the count, but they're not. They can hear everything around them, right? They'll even be active in a conversation if you talk to them. Say their name, all right? Puncture marks, if intravenous drug use is their choice. Now, it'll be hard for somebody that hasn't been in a medical profession or in law enforcement to identify early onset puncture marks. They're just red dots essentially. But when you come across somebody that's been doing it for a while and you got somebody that has a track or somebody that has used the vein long enough for it to collapse, it becomes a lot more easy to identify. And a good rule of thumb is for every inch of track mark, it's about 100 to 150 injections. Now, this is another narcotic analgesic. Mainly we see this one with heroin, but fentanyl, I wouldn't really say that it's too much, but these are general indicators for that entire category, which fentanyl is just one drug of. So there's a possibility to see all of these. Some are a little bit more prevalent, right? Now with the low, raspy speech, it is very exaggerated. When we were doing evals of people under the influence of fentanyl and heroin, and we're trying to interview them, we're getting people that are talking like this. And I have a microphone on. Let me try. I know. Give me 1 second. Do you think it's easy to come down and interview when you're doing this? Because then you have to get really close and got a bubble. I don't like being close to it. So getting close, nope. Don't like it. Slowed breathing. Now, pallor used to be on that as well. Because when you're talking about slowed breathing and other processes of the body that you relatively don't have control over, smooth muscles versus striated muscles, things like that, there's things that your body is unconsciously doing while you're moving around. Going through and picking up this table, I'm using striated muscles to make my body do that. But things such as causing my eye not to roll back into the back of my head, that's a smooth muscle. Now, there's also other ones that are going to cause me to make it move. Now, those involuntary processes is what's going to cause is going to be heavily affected by drugs, right? They're going to cause your blood pressure to raise or lower. In this case, it's going to lower very dramatically. Same with your heart rate. If your blood's not flowing through your body, you're going to appear to be very, very pale because your blood's not flowing very much. So you're going to be very pale. Also, if your blood's not flowing through your body very fast at a decent rate, you're going to be very cold, right? Because it's not the only thing that warms your body up, but it's one of the major ones, okay? Now, tolerance is going to affect what you may see. There are some people that, they are champions of heroin. You're talking about 2-3 grams a day. It's crazy. Not with fentanyl. Fentanyl, I mean, I really don't even see an average. I haven't been able to gather information because we don't have any yet on what the average dosage is for heroin. Because like I told you before, these pills, not every one of them is the same, right? Now, here's the important thing, and things that you guys might be able to recognize outside of those general indicators is the big important question is, are they overdosing? What am I going to see when they're overdosing? Well, the first thing you're going to see is actually a touch thing. They're going to be very cold and very clammy, almost wet, right? Everybody understand what I mean by clammy, right? Possibly put them into a sedative coma where they're non-responsive. They might have convulsions. Very slow and shallow breathing. I've seen some that it's just, you can barely hear it. And so when we go up to a scene, we're looking for the rise and the fall of the chest because we have to assess whether or not we're about to do some chest compressions. Because as soon as I press down the first part, all that cartilage right here just broke. So that's going to hurt, right? So we have to assess if doing chest compressions is necessary. We're going to check for their pulse rate. We're going to check for if they're breathing, and then we're going to do our response based on what we see. Okay? Now with that slowed, shallow breathing, it's very exaggerated. All right? Now what do you do if you see some of those? And it's not just those overdose signs that you might see. You might also see other evidence of, say, paraphernalia, right? You might see that foil with the pill on it. You might see a needle. You got to put all that stuff together, right, and make your assumption. The first thing you should be doing if you identify somebody that you might be having a opiate overdose is you need to call 911. Get a first responder there. Every single one of us carries Narcan, all right? The ambulances carry the real good stuff, but we do have very good, decent Narcan, and we drive faster than them. So we'll get to you first, promise. Administer Narcan if you have it and you know, and you've been trained and know how to do that. I'm sure that these kind ladies over there, has anybody picked up the Narcan? I don't think you just grab the box, right? They kind of explained how you do it, right? Keep the subject awake as best as you can. When in doubt, sternum rub. Okay? If you're not doing chest compressions, because don't mix those two. That's just not cool. All right? But if they're still responsive, kind of, and they keep drifting out, and you start to lose them, take your knuckles right here, put it right in that breastplate, and just do circles, nice and hard. That hurts very much so. They're gonna be angry, but it's gonna keep them awake. They're gonna try and fight you off, but it's gonna keep them awake. Just in time for us to get there. And we'll gladly take over the sternum rubs because I can take a punch, okay? But we're gonna make sure we can do whatever we can to save that individual. Keep them talking. That's just another way of just making sure they're staying awake. Talk to them about random stuff, random questions. You don't have to just carry on a conversation you expect them to remember. Just ask them random stuff, okay? Just keep them talking. Keep their body processes going. It keeps their brain working. Because the main reason why people die in overdoses is because their brain tells their body to stop breathing. Most overdose deaths when resulting from opioids is because they stopped breathing. Because their body is just shuts down and it essentially forgets to breathe, okay? All right, roll them onto their side. If they get into that late stage where they start losing control of their striated muscles, things like your tongue, they'll swallow it, okay? So keep them on their side to prevent that. Same thing if somebody's having a seizure, one thing you do is you roll them on their side, right? Now stay with them, and this is really important. Stay with them and stay on the phone with 911 the entire time. That is one thing I can't stress enough, is that when you call 911, stay on the phone until first responders show up. Then our dispatchers are going to hang up once they realize that first responders are on scene. And we do have a dispatcher in this audience, I'm not gonna single her out, but she can agree with me that when people hang up on 911 phone calls, that can be life-threatening, okay? Stay on the phone, give as much information as you can. As much of the time frame, what you see, what they're doing, if you're starting CPR, if you're trained in CPR, if you've administered Narcan, all that information is golden to us, okay? And that's it.